Hello again, and welcome back to Illegally Sighted. This is Jesse, and I am back for another episode of Growing Up Illegally Sighted, my new little experiment series here. And yeah, this time for the first episode, I just kind of gave a little bit of background on myself, talked about my vision impairment, my vision, what it is, how I do stuff, a lot of the questions that people ask when I first meet them, because it's inevitably, like I said, the first topic that usually comes up. So that's the first episode. This time we're going to jump into something a little more fun. Because this is largely a tech and gaming channel, let's throw some tech and gaming in this video. So this time we are going to talk about some of my first or most memorable gaming memories. We're going to do a separate one on computer memories because I think those are different enough. Yes, there are games for the computer too, and my first memories of computers are often gaming related too. But this time we're going to talk about consoles for the most part. So we'll go through some of that here. So, like I said, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I grew up with the Atari 2600 and the original Nintendo, the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System. The first console video game I ever played was an Atari 2600. And I'm pretty sure the first game I played was Combat. And when you're little, especially back then, like now, it's not really that big a deal because games look and sound and, they're just super advanced and everything. But, Atari, you were playing a game where, like, it was so basic. It was so, like, everything was super simple. It was really blocky. Things barely represented what they were supposed to be on the screen. Like, you couldn't, really make a realistic looking human character at all. They were just kind of these jumbled mess of pixels. But it was still cool. But it was funny because one of my babysitters, a couple of my babysitters actually had an Atari 2600. And one of them, they could never get it connected, or they couldn't get it working. I think they maybe didn't have the right adapter, or the machine was broken or something. But back then you would see this awesome artwork on the cartridge. Like the Combat, I think it had like tanks and whatnot on the cover. And like, oh, that looks so cool. Like, what you mean you can control tanks? And then you play the game and it's like this overhead, very simple, like maze type of thing. And you got like the overhead view of the tank. I mean, it was cool. But it was like, oh, that's just the cover. That's not what the games look like. That was the first realization. But then my other babysitter that we had, they had an Atari, and they had a whole bunch of games, because they had, my babysitter had like two other brothers, and yeah, so they had quite a few other games, and I got to play Combat. I remember playing Outlaw, or it was Outlaws, because Outlaw was the PC game, the shooter in the 90s. But Outlaws, and again, that's like this Wild West sort of like you were fighting an opponent, like you were on the either side of like a carriage or a cactus, and just very, very simple type of games. But I played a lot of Atari. Some of the runs that I remember, they had like they had the Spider-Man game, Chopper. Let's see, I think it was Chopper Command, because there was Choplifter where you had to rescue the people. That wasn't the one. But then there was Chopper Command, where it was like you were just zooming left and right and shooting down other planes or helicopters or something. That was pretty fun. Pac-Man, of course, which I didn't know any better. I thought it was cool. Yeah, you compare it to the arcade version, and it was terrible compared to the arcade version. But hell, I didn't know any better. I actually got really good at the Atari Pac-Man version. I'm trying to think of what other games I remember playing on the Atari. I mean, they had, like I said, they had probably had a good dozen or better of them. A couple that I could never figure out. They had Mario Brothers, not the Super Mario Brothers, but the Mario Brothers arcade game. That was fun. I remember they had Congo Bongo, and I could never figure out how in the hell that game worked. Because you're always stuck down in the corner, and I could never figure out how in the heck to play that game. But yeah, I mean, I just have a lot of, like, again, I just thought it was the coolest thing. I had watched TV before, but realizing that, oh, there are things that you can connect to your TV and you can control what's on the screen. Holy crap, that's cool. I didn't care that it was blocky. Oh, Asteroids, Space Invaders. God, how could I forget those? And then we got an Atari eventually, and we had some of those games. We had like, oh yeah, man. And then when we got one, I had, like I said, we had, there was River Raid. We had Donkey Kong. We had Pitfall. Enduro, classic one, racing game. There was, God, what else? Like all these things just coming back to me now. Frogger, gotta have that one. But I mean, all these games, it was just, we didn't care that they were blocky. We didn't care that they are like, oh yeah, okay, that's roughly a frog. Or, oh, okay, that's a race car. And you're racing down. I thought it was so cool. I remember in Enduro, see, that was like this racing game where you had to go, I think there was like 200 cars, and you had to go through this set time limit, and you would start out during the day, and then it would go darker, and then it would go night, and then the cars would actually just turn into headlights coming at you. And then there was a part where it was dark, and it had this fog effect, and your visibility was way lower, and I always remember hating the fog section. And then it would clear up and it would go back to, I think it was nighttime and then day again. So you had to get from like 200th down to first in order to win. And I used to be able to do it, but it was tough. And yeah, I remember playing those types of games. Like I said, Asteroids, Space Invaders. My dad even liked those. My dad, he liked a lot of the space games, so his game was Galaga. He never really played Nintendo or Atari that much, but he liked Space Invaders. He liked Galaga. Xevious was another one he liked. But yeah, I mean, Atari, I didn't care. I thought it was cool. So that's my first video game memory. Like just once I seen a video game and once I played a video game, I knew that this was something I was super into, and I just couldn't get enough. Like every time this was when people didn't have multiple TVs. They had a family TV. Maybe they had another one somewhere else in a bedroom or something if you were lucky. And usually they were like an old, maybe a black and white piece of crap TV or something. But most of the time they didn't have the Atari hooked up. And I knew, I'm like, can we hook up the Atari? They're like, no, quit asking. So yeah, I just always wanted to play. So that's Atari. That's my first real gaming memory. Arcade, I don't remember. I don't remember what I don't have a definitive, like, oh, this is the first arcade game I had seen. I know I had seen them. The first one that I do know that really caught my attention, and it was everywhere, was Pole Position. You go to a restaurant, you go to a bowling alley, you go to wherever, and you would hear the little music, you would hear the prepare to qualify. You're like, whoa, dude, a video game, it's talking. I mean, it was really just, it's really, you listen to it now and it's just really low res. It's really muffled. So like, it's just funny. But it was cool. And I remember begging my parents for a quarter to try it. And I was horrible. I was terrible. I just crashed and burned right away. But it's like, oh, this is so cool. Um, yeah, I remember that. And then arcades, like a little later, I remember being on a bowling league for a couple of years in like junior high. So this was way later, but seeing the Simpsons arcade game, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade games, those two beat 'em ups, blew my mind. Like you had the Simpsons theme song, you had the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles theme song. They looked like actual the cartoons. I mean, yeah, you look at the graphics now and like, okay, yeah, they're not quite right. But to me, they were like, that's close enough. These look like, I was used to Atari. I was used to Nintendo. And sure, Nintendo was better. But like seeing these things in the arcade, it was like, holy crap, that looks real. And then I don't know what the hell it was called. It wasn't a video game per se. It was somewhere between it wasn't pinball either. It was kind of a flat angled table type thing. And it was a baseball game. And we just thought it was so hilarious because I think they were just like little lights that represented your players. I don't remember if they actually like had like player visuals or not, or if it was just lights. But I remember you would play it and it had like an announcer or an umpire, and we always just thought it was hilarious because the umpire, the announcer, was always just so freaking rude. He's like, "It's gonna be a strike," and he would just rip on you when you whiffed it and didn't hit the ball. Or I don't know what that game was called. If anyone knows, it didn't show. It wasn't like a regular arcade cabinet. It was more long from front to back, like a pinball machine, and it was a baseball one. And I remember the announcer that would just insult you when you played. That's the main thing that I remember about that game, and it was funny. Yeah, if anyone knows what the heck that arcade game was called, leave it in the comments below, because I would love to find a video of that game again to figure out what in the heck it was. Pinball, my best memory of pinball was I went to school, I went to my hometown school from like kindergarten through 6th grade. And then we'll get into this in a later video, but to set the stage, I went to a school for the blind for 1 year. Actually, half a year, because through the morning I went to a public school. In the afternoon, I did some stuff at a school for the blind. Because they realized, maybe we shouldn't have waited until 7th grade in order to teach this student, Braille, or technology, or any number of things that would have not made him absolutely hate school with a passion. Maybe that would have been a good idea. You think? Well, at the school for the blind, they had a pinball machine, and the cool thing about it was free, so that was good. But on top of that, now that I understand how things work a little better, the one guy said it might have been broken, but I think they just had some of the dip switches set differently, and you got 9 balls instead of 3. And a few of us used to play the hell out of that game. And I wish to God I knew what that pinball machine was called. We had so much fun with that one. I don't even have a clue. It was an older one because there was no, I don't think it was based on any like TV show or anything or franchise, because there were no voice samples. It was all, dings and clicks and, kind of your old school pinball. but it had a, I mean, I remember the main thing about it. It had like a triangle, like in between your flippers. It had this big triangle of lights, and it would start at the top of the triangle, and like you would try to get it. It would kind of go clockwise around the triangle, and you, as you were playing, you were trying to light up this whole big triangle of lights. I've done it once or twice, and there was this big ramp on the right hand side that would take, you kick it up to the bullseye, and it would just make all kinds of crazy noises or whatever. But the main defining part I could remember is it had this big triangle of probably like 12 different lights or something like that in the bottom middle of the play field. Played the hell out of that. I mean, it was really nice to have a pinball machine that didn't cost money, because pinball was hard for me. And one of the strategies that you kind of do is you just kind of keep hitting the flippers until you could locate the ball, because God forbid you weren't hitting the flippers and it just went whoop, right down the middle. So you would just kind of keep hitting the flippers regularly, and then it's like, oh, okay, I see where the ball is now. Like if it ran down the left or right side, and then I could kind of, control of how I shot it, then I would stop and do a more precise shot. But like if you couldn't see the play field enough to, and the things were just, again, they were just zipping around the field so quickly that it was really hard to see and keep up where the heck the ball was going. So that was kind of the strategy for pinball. And a lot of other blind people I know have used that sort of strategy too. But then where I really got into gaming was the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System. And it was funny how I still remember how I saw that system. I have a couple stories about this one, my firsts. I had never seen one. Like I said, I'd played Atari for a couple of years. And I don't even remember what grade this was. It had to have been like somewhere between first, second grade, maybe. And like I said, we lived in North Dakota. It was freaking cold. It was snowy. We had horrible winters back then. And we had storm days. Basically, you take the bus into school, and if it got too shitty outside, you would stay at a storm home so that, okay, the buses couldn't run to bring you home. You would stay with a classmate in town. So early on, I stayed with this other kid. I don't know, we weren't really ever friends, and I think the older we got, we never really got along super well, but, it was fine when we were little kids, whatever. But I went over to this guy's house, this John guy's house, and they had a Nintendo. And I didn't see Super Mario Brothers. I did not see that. I did not see Mario that first night. Instead, the first NES game that I saw was Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. And that blew me away. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, I mean, that game is still amazing to this day. Recently, I've been watching these videos from Giant Bomb and Dan Reichert and was it Jeff Grubb, where they're trying to get on the world leaderboard, for speedrunning Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, beating the game, getting through Tyson as quickly as they can. And just being able to beat Mike Tyson is like a Herculean feat in itself. I still can't beat that fricker. I still can't beat Mike Tyson after 30 years plus. But now that if I had a CRT TV, if I had something low latency enough, I've watched enough of like Dan's videos and a few other videos where I think if I bashed my head against it long enough, I think I could beat him, because I sort of understand the strategies more. But again, like Atari, you had these kind of stick figures, just everything was square, blocky, very simplistic. And then I saw Punch-Out, and Punch-Out is one of the most impressive looking NES games because the characters are huge. They look like actual cartoon characters. I mean, every one of those fighters are iconic. Glass Joe, um, Von Kaiser, Piston Honda, Don Flamingo, King Hippo, Great Tiger, um, Bald Bull, Soda Popinski, Sandman and Macho Man, Tyson. I think we got all of them there. But they were huge. They were like well animated. They were like cartoony, but they were like more realistic looking. It was just fascinating. And then his sister, like when we would take a break, his sister would always go in and they would play duck hunt. And then I learned that, dude, wait, what? You have a gun and you can shoot a gun at the TV and kill ducks? That's freaking cool. So I wanted to play that, but I think he let me play like one round against Glass Joe or part of a round or something. But he's like, no, I just had to watch him play the whole time. And even that was fascinating. But I wanted to play a Nintendo so bad. I'm like, whoa, this is cool. Shortly after, we had moved, we were on the same property on the farm, but we lived in this old house, and we ended up moving into this, we got a trailer house. Yep, good old rural trailer trash. Yep, cool. But we moved into a trailer house, and I was coming home from some school thing or something. I was getting a ride home from my friend's parents, and because we had just moved in, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll show you around the house. I'll show you to my room. And I remember walking in to the trailer, and we were walking back. I was going toward my bedroom. I just, didn't have much on my mind. I was just do straight forward toward the objective. I get halfway down the hallway, and my friend Aaron, he's like, Jess, Nintendo. I'm like, wait, what? And I just I just turned around, saw the little TV on the floor, saw the Nintendo, and needless to say, Aaron didn't see my room that night. I didn't get to show him around the rest of the house because for about the next, I don't know, 25 minutes or something, when my friend's parents were, or my mom and her mom were talking, Aaron and we played Duck Hunt. So yeah, I finally got to play Duck Hunt. That was cool. And then I learned that, oh, it's Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt. It's both games on one cartridge. That's cool. And I remember getting home from school for the next day. The Nintendo was totally different than the Atari, and I was like, how do we get this to work? And I turned it on, and I just hit start, not thinking of anything. I'm like, oh wait, I wanted to play Duck Hunt, and instead I started playing this weird little game called Super Mario Brothers. And then I got hooked on that. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And I thought, again, I was used to Atari. That, oh, okay, you're going left to right. Okay, you're supposed to either jump over or jump on these things. I figured that out pretty quickly. And I kind of avoided the blocks right away. Even the question marks, I'm just like, oh, we're supposed to get to the right. Because, again, think about Atari. You had one button. Most of the games were just dead simple. Move and shoot, or move and whatever. And then eventually I hit a question mark. I'm like, oh, this mushroom came out. What the heck? Oh, dude, I got bigger. And then I figured out, like, it took me a little while longer because, like I said, I was just trying to go to the right and beat the level. But then I'm like, oh, dude, wait, what is this flower thing? And then I hit the B button. Like, dude, you can shoot? That game just blew my mind because it was something far beyond what the Nintendo or what the Atari, what I had played up to that point. So yeah, Super Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt, shooting a gun at a TV, that was cool. Punch Out, I never owned it, but I borrowed it from a friend a couple of times. Super Mario Brothers 2, realizing how different that game was, and we didn't know any better. We didn't know that that wasn't originally Super Mario Brothers 2. It was like this, Doki Doki Panic game from Japan, but we didn't know that. But like, oh, you pick up dudes and chuck them at each other and whatnot. You pick up like vegetables out of the ground and like just craziness. Super Mario Brothers 3 was like the best NES game ever. Got so hooked on that. I remember seeing my friend beat the first Super Mario Brothers because it was something I couldn't do for quite a while, and then eventually I beat it. That was a cool thing. We never had too many games right away because again, the more I played it, it was fine in the beginning, but then, like I said, that's where I really got hooked on video games, and my parents were like, "You play too much video games. No, we're not buying you more of this crap." And blah 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 blah. They did buy us one Christmas. I remember we got it was a present for both my brother and I, and so it was just this big box. We opened it up, and it was so they got it from used from somebody selling their collection. But we got like, I don't know, must have been like 10, 12 games, and there was an NES Advantage controller. There was that big old joystick controller, like a flight stick looking thing with the little rubber sticky pads on the bottom, so you can put it on the table. But there were some gems in there, man. There's like Blaster Master, um, Wrath of the Black Manta, I remember was in there. Narc, just a lot of fun stuff. And then I remember another Christmas we got like my brother got Bionic Commando. I love Bionic Commando. That game was hard, but it was so cool. It was a platformer where you couldn't jump. You only could use a bionic arm, and you had to swing everywhere. Really fun, really hard. I got to the very last level, but I never could beat the final boss. And I got this game called Silent Service, which I really didn't like. It was like, oh, I hate to say this, but I did not like it. I thought it was boring. It was this submarine simulation. So you were in a submarine. You could kind of look at your map. You could look at your periscope, and I didn't like I said, I was what, 8 years old, 10 years old at the time. I didn't know what the hell I was doing in the submarine simulator. My dad kind of liked it, but um, yeah, Silent Service. Sorry, mom, dad. But I really didn't like that game. Like, I'm like, dude, you want to trade? I want Bionic Commando. Um, Eventually, I got the NES collection because I think I do have most, if not all, of the games in my closet somewhere now. Um, I think the Atari stuff that my parents have still is at home, but I did get most of the games for my NES. Um, but that's where I really got hooked on games. And I remember, like I said, I wanted to play them. It's like I'd get a spare moment or whatever. Like, yeah, I want to play video games. Like, I didn't really want to watch TV as much. And they would hide the controllers from us because it's like, well, we know we don't want you to play. But then if we were left if I was left at home, like, oh, my mom went to town and I knew she was going to be gone for like an hour, I would like search the house and try to find the Nintendo controllers. And a couple times I got lost track of time, and she'd come home and I'd be playing Nintendo, so I was busted. Uh, yeah, just that kind of stuff. Oh yeah, no video games, man. Um, Super Nintendo. I remember my first memory of that was I saw it at a friend's house when I was actually at the school for the blind. Um, One of my teachers, her son had one, and we had gone over there for something, and he showed me Super Mario World. And I said I love Mario 1, 2, and 3, especially 3. The first thing that I remember that jumped out at me at that game is like the second level of the game where you're the with all the little slanty platforms, and then you see the giant bonsai bills. I've seen bullet bills before, but this ginormous bullet bill that took up like half the screen. Like, holy shit, that is the coolest thing ever. Um, and then he had Street Fighter 2 and Smash TV, um, both of which I was bad at the time. But like, I just remember I knew what Mario was, but then I seen, and then you could like hold a turtle shell, and then you would, on the first level where you grab it and you shoot it into all the, you flick it at all the Koopa Troopas, and you get the extra life at the beginning. I'm like, oh, that's a cool thing. And then seeing Yoshi for the first time, and that one wowed me quite a bit. And then when I was at the school there, they ended up getting a Super Nintendo eventually there, and I remember renting um, the Turtles in Time and Super Metroid and Mortal Kombat different times. And like Turtles in Time, like I had played the arcade game, I had played the NES game, and then I saw how good Turtles in Time was. Like I said, you guys know I love that game. I've played it on stream. I've done videos on it, especially now that we have the TMNT collection. That game is still amazing to this day. Um, Super Metroid, I remember just being blown away, like at the intro and like when they had that speech sample at the beginning, like the galaxy is at peace, blah blah blah, whatever. I just thought that was the coolest thing, and then the escape sequence. I'd loved Metroid on the NES. I was the first one that I remember. We didn't know any codes, and I was the first one to get to Turian. I was the first one to get to Mother Brain. My friend had a copy of Metroid, and I remember just getting my ass kicked in the Mother Brain room with those stupid little like shields that you had to shoot through. And I got to Mother Brain and just got wrecked. The first time I actually saw Metroid and didn't have a freeze beam and just got brutalized. But yeah, seeing Metroid, that was fun. Mortal Kombat. A friend and I was staying at the school. I've talked about this in other videos, but that's one of my early Mortal Kombat memories. Playing Mortal Kombat 2, and this guy was totally blind. He had played it, and he knew most of the fatalities, babalities, friendships. Because you had fatalities in Mortal Kombat 1, but then Mortal Kombat 2 was just everything was cranked up to 11, and Mortal Kombat is still the best early MK game, better than 3 for sure. Um, but I just remember like we were playing it on this big screen TV, and I'm surprised they didn't tell us we couldn't play that game because, like I said, my friend he was showing me all the fatalities, and like, you're ripping someone's head off or sucking them in, spitting out the bones, or electrocuting them with Raiden. Just all kind of shenanigans. I mean, we would go into the two-player mode and just have one of us, kill the other guy just so we could watch the fatalities over and over again, learn the fatalities and do them, because it was just hilarious. But yeah, I mean, I never owned a Super Nintendo, because like I said, growing up with the Atari, the Nintendo, like they're like, oh yeah, like hell, we're gonna spend more money and buy you a Super Nintendo or a Genesis. You played way too much Nintendo. That's. So no, I had to live vicariously through my friends. I had a friend or two who had a Super Nintendo, and I had a friend or two who had a Sega Genesis. Actually, I even had a friend who had a Master System. I remember playing Hang On, Safari Hunt, and Lord of the Sword. I remember those. But Genesis, yeah, I mean, I remember playing Sonic. Sonic 2 mostly. I remember playing Comic Zone blew me away. Like, that game was so hard, but I loved the sort of rock grunge presentation that had. And just the whole, you're in this comic book and like you have your bad guy is drawing in the enemies that you're fighting. I've covered that game in like the some of the Sega collections videos that I've done. Comic Zone blew me away on the Genesis. Um, the same friends that had a Sega Genesis got a Sega CD. So I got to see all the wonderful type of things like Sewer Shark. God, that game was so bad. But I remember being blown away just seeing like the footage, like the live action video, and I had to watch my friend play it because I was just horrible at that game. But I remember being blown away by that. Sonic CD. When I was a little bit older, I was able to switch, and we talked about the Storm homes earlier. Friend of mine in high school, I would go to his house, and usually it was like once a year, maybe twice a year, we had a storm, and I would go to this other friend's house, and we'd end up riding snowmobile for a little while, and then we would play a lot of Sega Genesis, Mortal Kombat or Sonic CD, stuff like that. So that was pretty fun. The first system I ever bought with my own money was the N64. Pissed my parents off on that one too. I don't think they ever found out about how that one worked because I remember going off to college. Well, I remember in high school, a couple of friends of mine and I, we went on a senior trip. That's a whole other story I won't get into here. But we saw, I don't remember what store, if it was a Target or something, but we saw the kiosk for Mario 64. And we thought the other games before looked real. Mario 64 looked like a freaking cartoon, man. Walking around Peach's castle, like the running, the jumping, the climb on trees, swim. He just looked like a real freaking Mario cartoon. And I knew I had to have that game. So what did I do? Literally, I think it was, like I said, I moved out to college like right before I turned 18. And it was like the second or third day that I was gone. I learned the bus schedule a little bit. I knew how to get to a couple of places. I knew how to get to the mall. And I think I went in and I went to I think it was a Target in the mall. And it was I went and I wrote a check and I bought an N64 and Mario 64. And back then my bank account was still at home because, like I said, I just moved out. I hadn't done anything, and so my parents got the statement next month. It's like, what the hell did you spend $150 on, or whatever it was? Whatever, 150, 160 bucks. Well, because I think it was like 120 for the system, and then I don't remember if Mario 64 was included or if you got it for what it was, but I bought those two things, and I just lied and said I had bought some stuff for college or something. Because then I remember it's like they found out I had an N64. A couple years later, I brought it home, and I was like, oh, that's my friend's. I'm just borrowing it, and so I was like, I didn't want him to know. But then my brother, who didn't really play video games either, that was one of the fun memories I have with him. Is I brought it home. He even got hooked on Mario Kart and GoldenEye because I would be the one who would be like, you'd be watching TV or just doing whatever, and I would go to play video games growing up. And we'd be watching TV or something. He would go, hey, let's go play Mario Kart or let's play GoldenEye. I'm like, all right, we got him. So yeah, I remember playing a lot of GoldenEye with my brother, Mario Kart with my brother. I remember he actually helped me because there was a level that I visually had trouble with. Anyone who's played GoldenEye remembers I forget what the level is called, but it was the level where you have to protect Natalia as she's hacking into this computer, and you have all these guards, these dudes that are coming from all sections of the room. It was late in the game, and I just couldn't. They would always get to her. And after my brother had played, multiplayer for a little while, I showed him the level. I was like, "Can you see this well enough? Can you?" And he got it like I don't know, like not very, second or third try. And then once we got past that, then we were able to beat the rest of the game. But I remember my brother helped me out with that visually. And then, because we were in college, playing, like I said, tons of Mario Kart 64, Koopa Troopa Beach. Oh dear God, the hours we played on that one track alone. Um, Contrary to what popular belief says, Mario Kart is not an E-rated game. We took that shit seriously, man. We were we were very brutal, angry individuals. We were very competitive playing that game. Oh, we had just people playing it in the dorms. We played GoldenEye. We played 1080 snowboarding. I remember one night a friend and I were like, "Oh crap, we got we were up and we were playing 1080 until like 3, 4 in the morning." It's like, and we both had the same class at like 8 or 9 in the morning. We're like, "Shit, dude, we got to get up early tomorrow." But yeah, him and we would have this just competitions. We could never get the elusive 1080 consistently, and we would go back and forth and get high scores. And I remember he went off to class one time, and I just had this run of a lifetime. And if you got the high run on a level, when the game started up, it would show that replay. I'm like, dude, check this out. I had to show him and he got so mad. He's like, oh, you suck. So fun. Um, but yeah, I mean, those are some of my first gaming. I know it was not more than just my first gaming memories, but those are some of my kind of history. My first console, my first arcade, Nintendo is what really sucked me in. Um, Seeing leaps in generations, the Super Nintendo, the N64 being the first system I ever bought on my own. Then I owned a lot of other systems, the PlayStation, the Dreamcast, the, GameCube, Xbox, whatever going forward. We'll talk more about that stuff probably later, but yeah, those are just some of my, shall we say, gaming memories that shaped who I am when I was growing up. Like I seen the first computer or the first video game, was fascinated. I saw the Nintendo. I was hooked. Super Nintendo, blown away. N64, both like it's just adding the multiplayer and like the N64. We were in a perfect time for that because online, we had T1 in the dorms, but most people didn't have online yet. And being in a place where you live in a dorm and it was a 4-player system, having games like Mario Kart, Perfect Dark, GoldenEye, 1080, like just it was a multiplayer system. I mean, we played so much of that in college. I'm so glad I was in college when I was because it was the perfect time for that system. I think that's where we're going to wrap it up, though. I mean, like I said, I'm sure we'll talk about gaming in other aspects and other ways. I know we will, in future videos. But that kind of just gives you, it's a little bit of reminiscing about stuff. Some of my firsts, some of my kind of gaming history. Um, oh God, I didn't tell. Well, no, that'll be more next video because that'll be the PC. I was gonna say I didn't talk about Doom next video because I'll talk about some of my computer memories. I got some stories there for you too, guys. Boy, yeah. So we will wrap it up here. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Give it a like if you did. Follow me on Twitter at BGFH79, twitch.tv/IllegallySighted, IllegallySighted.com, right here on YouTube. And again, let me know if you have any other questions for the series, if you like the video, or if you like this kind of content. If you don't, whatever. But until next time, I will chat with everybody again later.